Nick Schultz and Tony Rodriguez, who are the only two candidates on the ballot for the November 5th election. Please make sure you vote. Nick is currently the mayor of the city of Burbank, and Tony is a 25-year U.S. Army veteran with management experience. I will alternate the asking of questions, first Nick, then Tony, and vice versa, and each candidate will have 2 minutes, and then the other candidate will have 2 minutes to rebut. And Andy, I'll indicate when it's time to start, all right? The clock. We have a timer, an official timer. Andy, Libby, thank you. When I ask you a question, my dear candidates, please do not recharacterize or answer a different question. If you don't know the answer, then say so, and we'll move on. We want to hear facts, substance, and specific information. I will intervene if a candidate deviates from the question, so please don't do that. We'll cover more ground that way, and our people here tonight can make informed voting decisions. Please focus on the questions. If we have time, we'll take audience Q&A. Eleanor is circulating cards and pens if you have questions, but I hope to cover a lot of ground with our candidates tonight. Yes, Deborah?
Question asking, who do they give the questions to?
I'll ask for them to be passed forward. Thank you, Deborah. And you can use the pens and cards provided, and please understand that the assembly seat is a state legislative one. Our candidates here, if elected, will not be responsible for decisions, including bad ones made at the city and county levels. So we'll have plenty of work ahead of us, so don't hold me responsible for that. So Assembly District 44 includes the cities of Burbank and Glendale, alongside LA neighborhoods of Sunland, Tujunga, North Hollywood, Sherman Oaks, Studio City, Valley Village, Tujunga, and of course West Toluca Lake. And I want to thank our candidates very much for being here. We want to hear their views, which are of the greatest importance to this neighborhood. Even though they will be operating on a state level, their orientation will have a profound and real effect on us and where we live. So my opening question, I'll go to Tony. And when I give you the sign, Andy, start the clock. Why do you want this job? Why do you want to represent the 514,568 people of Assembly District 44, and why should we entrust you with that responsibility?
Well, the reason I want the job is because I want to bring common sense approach to what's happening in our cities. Right? We have about 14 cities in our district, and we need to work as one unit. We need to be able to share information about what we're doing well in one city and take it to the next city. So the reason I want to run is because I want to bring that common sense approach and open communication, because we have to kind of get over ourselves and heal the divide between all of us, taking sides about things that aren't important, and work with us. Why do I think I'm a good candidate for the position? Well, I spent 26 years in the Army and I came home in one piece. The other thing is, things in the military are done with a common sense approach. You know, before we execute any mission, we plan the mission. We just don't throw money at a mission and say, okay, go take the hill. There's always a who, what, where, and why, how we do things. And I think that's lacking in the leadership in California at this point. We're not thinking, we're just throwing money to problems that we've been throwing money on since the 90s, and it's not solving them. We don't have a strategic plan to do anything in the state of California. That was the last question.
Why should we entrust you with this responsibility?
Well, I'm an honorable man, and I spent 26 years in the Army, and I believe in the flag, and I believe in the American people. And the American people come first, regardless of what anybody else thinks. You should entrust me because I'm going to protect your rights. I'm going to do what's in your best interest, and you're never, ever going to be able to say, Tony, I didn't see you in my neighborhood, or Tony, I didn't see you on my house. I will come to your house. Just like my campaign, if you look at the flyer, that's my personal cell phone. That's not somebody else answering my phone, that's me. When you call, I answer the phone.
Very good. Thank you. So you come in under 2 minutes, and we appreciate that. I don't know that you'll want to. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to want to answer 514,568 people's phone calls, but thank you. Nick, same question to you. Why do you want this job? Why do you want to represent over 500,000 people, and why should we entrust you with that responsibility?
Well, first of all, before I go on, I just want to thank all of you for taking the time tonight to be out here for what I think is going to be an important conversation. And I want to thank you for hosting and pulling all the questions together. You know, it was a difficult decision for me to run for this seat. I have not one but two jobs that I really love. I currently represent all of you in the California Department of Justice, where I'm prosecuting public corruption, human trafficking, labor trafficking, white-collar crime, anything and everything under the sun. And on top of that, since 2020, I've had the privilege of serving the city of Burbank on the council, and now as mayor. The reason I'm running, if I had to put a word on it, I love your approach, Tony, of common sense. The only issue I take with that is common sense. What's common to you might be different to me, especially when you start talking about value statements. We need more no-nonsense approach in government. Government's there to solve our problems. And what I'm tired of seeing, coming from the local perspective, is a lot of really great broad policy strokes coming out of Sacramento, but we got to get down to where the rubber meets the road. We can't continue to legislate from the state level and schlep the responsibility down to local government. Whether it's housing, climate change, public safety, there is a role for state government to play in terms of programs and dollars to assist. And here's where I'll wrap with to your last question. You got two great choices here in this race, but the reason I put my name forward is that we have huge problems facing California right now. We have a historic budget deficit. For the sake of time, I won't, but we have a ton of problems, and I feel that I have more practical, lived experience, ready to hit the ground running day one, because at the end of the day, you deserve someone who's going to get results. It's all about track record of accomplishment, and I simply ask that when you leave here tonight, look at my track record, look what I've done on your behalf at DOJ, look at what I've done in the city of Burbank, and I think it speaks for itself.
Thank you. Good. So, speaking of problems, so...
I assume you have a few to talk about?
Yes.
All right.
So, our neighborhood here, West Toluca Lake, part of Greater Toluca Lake, is suffering from a distorted sense of priorities, as many people believe, between addressing the needs of homelessness and abdicating responsibility for normal government services. We've seen a huge erosion of normal government services at the city and at the state and the county level, for that matter. The state has imposed gross distortion and RENA numbers for new housing, which is destroying our residential quality of life. These things emanate from state mandates. What will you do to correct and reverse these horrors for us and those in Assembly District 44? Let's start with Nick.
Thank you. So there was a couple great points addressed in the question. First of all, let me say that the idea that you will call 911, for example, and not get a response at all, or certainly within a half an hour, which is a story that I have heard as I've walked every corner of this district over the last 2 years, that is unacceptable. The point I'm trying to make is that whether you're talking local government or state government, we have to understand that when it's all about services that we provide, whether it's trash pickup, whether it's calling and ensuring that police or fire will be there in under 3 minutes or less, which is what we've done in Burbank. That's the kind of expectation that you should have when you seek city or county or state services. Now, I agree with you. When you look at the issue of housing, here's the way I see it. We do have a housing shortfall in the state of California. We're short about 1 million units of housing. And by the way, don't take my word on it. Look it up for yourself. It's all there in the data. But the problem is, again, talking about no nonsense, how many of our legislators have sat on planning commissions? How many of them have served on city councils? Not that many. And the problem is you lose the nuance in policy development. You start treating every parcel of land as if it's exactly the same. Look, an ADU here or there isn't going to do a darn thing to solve the housing crisis. We need housing on a larger scale, and we have to look at our vacant and underutilized commercial properties that are throughout this district. Those opportunities are ripe to develop housing. And while we're at it, let's add more of that missing middle income housing. There's plenty of apartment buildings at luxury rates going up everywhere, but I can tell you that with a 1.5 or whatever $1 million home sale price, which is what we're seeing as average across the district, that's beyond reach for working families like mine. When Alan and I wanted to buy a home, you can't get anything for under $1 million. That shouldn't be the case. We need more condominiums, we need more townhouses, and if we push the development in the right strategic way, it can complement existing neighborhoods. It can be compatible with it. What we have right now is a one-size-fits-all solution. So that's what I'm going to take is my experience to Sacramento.
Thank you.
Time.
All right. Very good. So same question now for you, Tony. How can you help us correct and reverse these horrors?
Well, part of the problem is that the leadership is detached from the community. Let's face it, right? We only see our public officials when it's election time or when they need something from us. It should be the other way around. We should be able to communicate with the constituents, and maybe not on the phone, right? That's a lot of phone calls, but we can have Zoom calls to find out what's happening on the ground, because that's what's important. We need to find out what's happening here. Somebody in Sacramento is not going to know that you're not getting the services, whether it's Caltrans, whether it's 911, unless you raise your hand and speak up. Right? And the only way to do that is, and as much as I hate to admit this, there's some people out, some congressmen out there who conduct monthly Zoom calls to find out what's happening in the community and what he can address. And with his influence, he could probably fix some of those problems. Now, when it comes to the homeless issue, you know, LASA was created in the early 90s, I believe. I'm not sure exactly what year, out of necessity, because we've had a problem since the 90s. But we put it together and gave it money and put it out there and fixed it. No plan, no strategic plan on how to really solve the homeless issue. We created this little group of 5 or 6 people to run this program who have failed to run the program since 1991. We need to ensure that anybody that's involved with LASA is an elected official, so they answer to the citizens. We don't need people answering to certain government officials, because, you know, if I get to choose my group of people, those people are going to be beholden to me, right? But if the people choose them, they're going to owe something to the people. And to Nick's point, there's a lot of open properties out there that are not being used for the homelessness. There's federal buildings, state buildings that aren't being used. And I know Nick has heard me say this before. In the 90s, we used to use National Guard armories to help the homeless people. And the state of California shut all that down.
Time. Very good. Thank you, Tony. So, speaking of services, one in particular, the failures of Caltrans have peeved quite a number of people here, including myself. Caltrans is a state agency and has added a lot of misery with its lack of maintenance, which is degrading our residential neighborhoods even further. They're not doing their jobs. The lack of responsiveness of agencies like Caltrans in particular, and delay in receiving normal requested services that shouldn't need to be requested in the first place, because it's obvious by anyone monitoring their responsibilities that the work isn't getting done. It shouldn't take numerous requests to get Caltrans to do the very things it is tasked with doing. How will you help us with this? Tony, let's start with you.
Well, so I don't come from an environment where if people don't do their jobs, you get to keep your job. And that's part of the problem in society today. We elect people, and whether they do their job or not, we just keep voting for the same old people. Right? I am a fan of, if you're not doing your job, I'll give you a warning, give you some training, and if you can't do your job, then I'm going to terminate you and find somebody that can do your job for you. And I think that's the mentality we need to have as citizens and voters. If somebody's not doing their job that they promised, or even attempting to do their job, whether they can control whatever they're trying to fix, stand next to me as a leader and say, you know what, I agree with you, Tony, and we're going to go to Sacramento and fight with the governor on this. But if you're going to hide behind the shield of, I want to get votes next time around, then you don't deserve to be a leader or work for the government, period. We need to hold people accountable, whether it's fiscal, transparency, or if you don't do what you're supposed to do, we need to replace you and find somebody that can do the job for you. We need to stop this Mickey Mouse thing we're doing in Sacramento. We need to make sure that the people we put in place are people that we can hold accountable. Kind of like, go back to LASA, we don't hold anybody accountable to anything anymore. We just vote because they have nice hair, or they've been there before, and we're just going to, I don't know this other guy, he doesn't have as much experience as this other guy, so I'm going to vote for this person. No, it doesn't matter, and nothing against you, Nick, it doesn't matter whether I've been in politics or not. It's about having an approach to do the right thing for everyone. It's about talking to each other and helping each other out. Government begins at home, and I've said this from day one. We need to learn from people that have good households. Mom and dad make all the decisions.
Fine. Well done. All right. How about me and my hair? No, you don't. You don't
Are you complimenting my hair?
No, my hair.
Okay, yeah. You don't have to answer that. All right.
I like your look anyway.
Nick, Caltrans, and
Oh.
before
Yeah.
we start the timer, big shout out, Diane Ryan, stand up, stand up, stand up. Without Diane Ryan, we wouldn't get with Caltrans. Thank you, Diane. Okay, starting the clock on your response to the Caltrans
Sure.
failure to perform question.
Absolutely. And before I go on, is the sound quality okay? I say it's really okay. Thank
Can
you.
you hear us in the cheap seats? Yes.
All right, so continuing before my time runs out, let me say the quiet part out loud. Caltrans has been a pretty shitty neighbor. They have been. When you look at their properties and the condition that they're in, when you see the lack of maintenance, the lack of care, the lack of responsiveness, and this is a story that I've heard as I've walked throughout this entire district. You know, look, Tony and I have plenty of differences, and we'll talk about them tonight, but this is where I do think there's some common ground, Tony. There is a lack of accountability. What I would add to your answer, though, is that we have to understand the structure of state government. So think about it. Tony or I, one of us is going to be elected to represent this area in the assembly. We're term limited. After 12 years at most, if there's not redistricting, right, we're out, and you have heads of agencies that have been there for decades. You have personnel in these agencies that have been there for decades. I'm going to bring not my experience in politics, but my experience in local government. When somebody reaches out to me, whether it's a phone call or an email, and they need help, my job is not to tell them it's not my problem, even if it's a federal issue or a state issue. My job is to say, I have the means and the mechanism to advocate for you, to connect you to the right person, to put you in touch with someone who can do something to help. That's the level of experience that I'm going to bring to Sacramento. And on the issue of Caltrans, this is my one gripe, if you will, against anyone, not specific, not related to party, but just anyone in the state legislature. Everybody's so focused on passing the biggest number of bills that they can so that the most can get to the governor's desk, so that the most of those can be signed. Here's the reality. The greatest power that the legislature has is the power of oversight. Any state agency can be called before the legislature to account for what they're doing or what they're not doing, how they're spending your money or how they're misspending your money. That is a power that I feel like legislators just often seem to forget that they have. And that's where my professional background comes in. I have worked my entire career as a prosecutor. I know how to find the answers and, quite frankly, make people uncomfortable until they give us the truth.
Very good. Thank you, Nick. So let's talk about fraud. Okay. Everybody saw the headlines a few months ago that the California EDD admits that it paid as much as $31 billion to fraudsters during the pandemic, which is a staggering loss of taxpayer funds. This diverted payments due to people affected by unemployment, by COVID, and people who need the relief but never received it. It's a shocking loss that all this taxpayer money was squandered because of a lack of law enforcement, nor were there any checks and balances to stop it. This loss is so profound that it's had material and a destabilizing effect on the government's ability to perform services. What will you do about it, and how will you recover those funds and demand the fraudsters are found and prosecuted? Nick.
I really appreciate that question because that's what I've been trying to do since 2018. I've spent my career most of late, including, in fact, I just wrapped a grand jury this last week. I can't get into all the details of it, but to your point, whether you're talking EDD, Employment Development Department, FTD, Franchise Tax Board, any number of federal agencies in terms of mortgage loan origination, there is rampant fraud throughout the system. Now, what I think we're missing in California, and I will give the feds one bit of gloat or one little bit of praise here. They have the Office of Inspector General housed in every single program, an OIG for short. They exist to police each program to ensure that there is investigation into fraudulent use of monies or fraudulent applications to programs, and then they work hand in hand with federal and, in my case, state prosecutors to go after these people. We don't have a comprehensive OIG structure in state government, and we should. Every single program should have investigative personnel and committed attorneys to investigate and detect and prosecute to the fullest extent of the law of fraud. Because at the end of the day, we all pay for it, right? I mean, the cost is borne by somebody. So that would be my big picture idea. We have to develop an OIG structure for every single state agency. In the time remaining, I would just say this. Look, we all have to do our part. We have to speak out when we see it, and we have to demand more accountability from our state electeds. The reality is that all these problems we're talking about, they didn't happen overnight. The fraud's been here. It's time that we start asking for more action and more reform, and I believe that my experience in the justice system, my experience prosecuting fraudsters, which is a big part of my job, I think that I know how to get in there, work on public safety committee, and do a lot more quickly than almost anyone else who's in the Capitol right now.
Okay, very good, thank you. Good, and just a small extra question for Nick, keep it very brief.
Okay.
What's your conviction rate?
I actually don't track it, but here's why. If I had to guess,
Keep it
it's
short.
over 90%,
Okay.
but the reason that I don't track it is that whether it was Kamala Harris or now Rob Bonta, we've always taken the position that right is right. I've dismissed cases when a witness is flipped and I didn't feel that I could ethically prove it, but generally speaking, when I seek an indictment before the LA County Grand Jury, I get it.
Very good. Okay. So, Tony, same question for you. California EDD admits it paid as much as $31 billion to fraudsters. What will you do about it? How will you recover those funds and demand that fraudsters are found and prosecuted?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would instruct my state attorney general to go after them, right? Because what we don't do in California is we don't go after people. And I'm in a business where I deal with EDD all the time. I deal with, workers' comp insurance. And in California, it's standard practice to let people get away with things for whatever reason, right? I don't know why they do it, but I'm going to give you an example. Workers' comp case in California that happened in my office. Somebody hurt their back. We got them on videotape. We got them playing basketball in a league in Inglewood, and yet I couldn't get the charges dropped. So we had to pay him off so he would go away because the state supports that kind of behavior. And that's the problem, right? It's like a child. If you support bad behavior and you keep condoning the bad behavior and making excuses for the bad behavior, people are going to do what they're going to do, right? You forgot to mention that even convicts were getting unemployment benefits, right? During this time, right? How does the state not know that somebody's in prison and gives them money? So we got to hold people accountable. Transparency is critical. It doesn't matter who you elect. If you elect somebody and they're not transparent with you, then you know what? Come next election cycle, get them out. None of this 12-year tour at the state assembly level or the Senate level. If you're not doing your job, and your job is to protect the citizens of the district and the state, then you need to go. We need to find somebody that's willing to go public and say, you know what, Governor, this is wrong. We need to go after these people. And you're right, even the Army has an inspector general, right? We gotta have somebody to oversee all these things. And I think it should be a regular person. It shouldn't be anybody that is connected to anybody in Sacramento, because that's the problem. We have a pony system up there, and it has to change. And it's both parties, right? It's everybody. We need to make a difference, and the only way to change things is to hold people accountable.
Very good. I want to commend the candidates for keeping time. All right, very nice. Yeah.
We don't really have a choice, do we, Tony?
So, another money question. Unfunded liabilities. For the uninitiated, unfunded liabilities are what the government pays to retirees, employment, medical, pension, etc. So, government employee unfunded liabilities are a destabilizing, embarrassing, and largely unmitigated problem. Government employees retire early and get pensions, medical benefits for life, and to add insult to injury, the state that alleges that we have a so-called housing crisis, which is a gross exaggeration according to the West Toluca Lake Residents Association and to myself, allows the pension funds to be invested in real estate speculation and development. So it's shocking that government benefits come from the very thing the state claims is such a crisis. How will you address these unfunded liabilities, Nick?
Well, first thing I'm just going to say right out the gate is that, we can agree to disagree, but I've looked at the data and we do have a housing crisis statewide. The thing that we have.
Plenty of questions about that.
Totally, and we'll get to it. But I just, because you brought it up in the call to question, I just wanted to share my perspective so that way everyone can at least decide whether I'm the right candidate for you or not. Now, what I will say about the unfunded liability crisis is we're absolutely seeing it at the local level. Now, what I think every community should be doing, from my perspective, is what we've done in Burbank. We have prepaid our liability because what we did a few years back is we came out of the COVID-19 pandemic, we immediately balanced our budget, and we looked at different cost restructuring tools to eliminate our long-term year-to-year costs for this unfunded liability. So we started setting aside more of our, not our general fund, but our specialty fund one-time dollars to help pay down that liability. Now, we have a terrific financial services director in my community who's aware of any number of matching state and federal funds that can help communities do that. We had a lot of exposure to the programs that we could take advantage of to do that. We need to be sharing that information. I know this is something we talked about the other night, Tony, right? We got to share that story.
What's that person's name, just out of curiosity?
Jennifer Becker. She is fantastic. If you want to know how to turn a $12 million budget deficit around in less than 24 months, Jennifer Becker in the city of Burbank found a way to do it. She is at the top of her game, and she is absolutely fantastic, along with our city treasurer, Crystal Palmer. But what I would say is that information needs to be exchanged at the local level. Yeah, the state has incredible liability, you're absolutely right, but when you look at local jurisdictions, when you look at the city of LA's unfunded liability, it is through the roof. The program is going to go bankrupt, and that's where the state has to be talking about offering more expertise in terms of programming assistance. And look, a few years back, we had PEPRA, we reformed pensions. We have to continue to look at other ways we can modify that program at the edges.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. And just to summarize your answer, it's to set aside one-time dollars to pay down the debt and to engage people like Jennifer Becker to get more grant funding. Is that, am I paraphrasing accurately?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
Mostly accurate, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So then over to you, Tony, unfunded liabilities. What would you do?
Well, there's a lot of things about the federal government I don't like, but there's some things I do like. And what they did with the military retirement, whether I like it or not, they made it a program where you actually have to put money into the program, kind of like a 401k plan, so that veterans had money when they retired, instead of the old way where you get a certain percentage for a lifetime and free medical for a lifetime. So they did that. I think what we need to do in California is be more diverse about the money. Like, we know that CalPERS is a mess. We know that, right? To fix that, you just can't fix it doing what we're doing now. It's not going to work. We have to have a hybrid program for any new hire that we bring in, so that we don't fall into the same trap. Because our kids are going to inherit this debt. They're going to inherit it. There's not much we can really do. Kudos to Burbank for what you did in Burbank. But Los Angeles is a huge city, and it's going to be more difficult for LA to do what Burbank did. Now the premise is great. I totally agree with the premise, but it's going to take time. So what we need to do is any new hires that come into the city of LA is, you know what, you're not going to have the regular retirement that the people that are going to work here before have. We're going to have a hybrid program for you, and this program is going to entail you donating some of your money, which will take you out of that tax. We won't tax you for that money, but you can donate it and collect money like my wife did with her 401k, or like I'm doing with mine where I'm currently working, where it's going to be money that I invested part of it, but my company's investing money in it too. So it's something to kind of even it out. To say that we can solve it, it's a fantasy. We're not going to be able to solve it the way we're doing it, not the way we're doing it today. So we got to have people as we hire them now. This is your retirement plan. Take it or leave it, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. We got to do what's best for everybody in California, not just certain people in California.
Thank you, Tony. So just to summarize, do it a bit more like the military, where money is put in every pay period.
Right.
Okay. All right. Very good. So, and we're going to take questions from the audience. If you have any questions you'd like to write down, our lovely card carrier is Eleanor will take questions. All right? Just pass it forward, Kevin, or give it to Eleanor. Thank you. So let's talk about housing and this so-called crisis. Thank you. What is the current vacancy rate now in this district, Assembly District 44, Nick?
I thought it was Tony's turn.
I'm going back and forth, I'm keeping you guys guessing.
That's a great one. I don't know the vacancy rate off the top. If you happen to know, though, I'd love to hear it.
I do, but let's ask Tony first.
Sure.
I don't know.
That's all right. Okay, it's fair to admit that, because I've done some deep research. Nick, what about the vacancy rate in Burbank? Do you know what that is?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Do you, Tony?
No, I don't.
Okay. So, what is an appropriate vacancy rate? What is recommended?
My view is always, is this a timed answer? Or just short?
You can have 2 minutes if you need it.
I think I can do it in like 30 seconds. It's functional zero. You're never going to have 0% vacancy. It's sort of like unemployment. That's not a realistic goal to aspire to because you're always going to have some fungibility in the market, just as you're going to have people between jobs because they're making career changes. But you want that number to be as close to functional zero, which I would peg probably somewhere between 0 and 5, 6, 7%.
What is a functional zero?
Functional zero as in meaning that if somebody needs a place to live in a community, hopefully they can find one, but it's never going to be a 0% vacancy rate because you're always going to have units turning over as people are making upgrades to property.
I'm just not clear what the difference is between 0 and functional zero. Okay.
It's a term we use in transportation.
Okay. So, what is an appropriate vacancy rate, Tony?
Well, I would like to say 0, but I can't, right? So
Functional zero.
if we're going to talk numbers, I would say I would try to keep it under 5%.
Okay. Under 5%.
More common ground, I like it.
Well, that is the I think the average maybe not recommended, but stated by HUD, all right, Housing and Urban Development.
Mm-hmm.
So anything hovering around 5% is considered, decent and acceptable. But as far as the vacancies, and this, to my mind and to the mind of the association, is a very important question when you're pushing more housing, okay? So just real quickly, within the district for which I could find data, and this may be under reporting, it's about 8,525 vacancies from apartments.com. That's Studio City, Sherman Oaks, North Hollywood, Valley Village, Burbank, Glendale, Toluca Lake, Tahunga, Sunland, and West Toluca Lake. So about 8,500 roughly. All right? So there's approximately a 4.82 Los Angeles County vacancy rate, and that's per the California Department of Finance in 2024. And again, I think this is important. We need to know the numbers. If we're trying to fix a problem, what are we trying to fix? So, let's go to housing and RENA. All right. So, whoops. Oh, thank you, Nick.
You got it.
All right. Why, Nick, are so many units mandated to be built in the most expensive zip codes in the world, including over 456,643 units mandated by RENA to be built in the city of Los Angeles alone, when there is so much space available much more cheaply in areas like Lancaster, San Bernardino, Riverside, Palm Desert, etc.?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. On the vacancy rate, by the way, I'd love if after this you could send me the information you pulled on that so I can learn more. Look, we have RENA, which, by the way, does everyone know RENA? I feel like most people get it, but Regional Housing Needs Assessment, it's a process we go through every 8 years to forecast the amount of units of housing and different income levels, right, that every community is going to have to grow. Now, you made a comparison of City of LA, and you looked at this district, and you said with a less than 5% vacancy rate, why do we have to add all this housing? Please allow me, if I can for a moment, to throw my own community under the bus, because communities like Burbank didn't build the housing that we should have. Case in point, a 3-to-1 jobs to housing ratio. We are jobs rich. Tons of people come and work at the studios every single day, and they don't have anywhere, certainly not anywhere affordable, but in many cases, not nearly enough places to live. What that does is that drags down the entire region. Now, how we go about calculating it and doing it on a regional basis, Cal Cities has been advocating for reform to that process, and some of those ideas I think are really good ideas to have a far more fair way of calculating the need and being more specific in the sub-regional areas. But at the end of the day, we do have a housing crisis, at least in Burbank, because I know for a fact we haven't built housing. One more case in point, we've entitled a little over 1,000 units of housing in my 4 years on council. Not a great deal, but a decent number. That's more units of housing, period, across, whether it's market level or affordable. That's more units of housing than we had built in the prior 20. In fact, George, I stand corrected, it's more than 25 years combined before I joined council. So why we have SB 35, why we have a housing crisis, is because of communities like mine that didn't build the housing. And we have opportunity sites in those areas to build housing. One more example, the old IKEA location in Burbank. You've probably all been to the new one. It's a great place to buy. Why can't we put housing on that site? It's walkable to transit and jobs. Let's do it.
Thank you, Nick. Chef's prerogative, I suppose. Can you please confirm? You said 4,000 units of housing were entitled in the city of Burbank, which is more than
1,000 units of housing.
1,000 units of housing,
Between 2020, end of 2020 and 2024.
which is more than has been entitled in the last 25 years.
Yeah, so if you went back from, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
Sure.
Very good. All right. Same question for you, young Tony.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, again, I have a different approach. I think that Tess has said it perfectly. There's other locations that we can build housing. LA's already crowded. I know my neighborhood, Southern Tahunga, I don't want them building any more in Southern Tahunga. It's already crowded as it is, right? We gotta keep the integrity of our neighborhoods. And we have to push back on people in Sacramento. And the people we elect have to be warriors, right? They have to be warriors and not be afraid to get banned from committees or get pushed out because they're arguing and disagreeing with the governor and his team, right? We gotta find a way to get people motivated, just like you guys are in Toluca Lake about this housing, and I know you are, is spread that message to other cities. We need to build, hell, Needles is empty. The city of Needles in California is empty. Why can't we build housing there, affordable housing? Right? You know why we can't build there? Because it's gonna be affordable housing, right? LA market is expensive land. It's gonna cost a lot more money to keep building in LA. It's not gonna solve the problem. And it's not gonna be affordable housing in LA. Maybe Burbank, but it won't be in LA. So we need to build in locations where the land is a little cheaper, so we can build, spend less money building, so it doesn't cost $800,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, and we can house people. And what we do is, with communities like that, whether it's Lancaster or Needles, think about this. We get people in housing, small businesses will start going to those cities, they'll open up their shops, the economy will improve in that small city. So there's ways we can do it, but it's all about communicating and not about fighting anymore. We got to show the governor that what they're doing is not working, and the only way we can do it is if we work together. And I don't mean just politicians, I mean the citizens work with us together and let us know what's going on. Because if you don't tell us, again, we don't know. People are sitting in Sacramento, they don't care about what's happening down there.
Right.
And that's it.
Very good. Thank you. All right. We're going to come back to housing, population, and homelessness. But you mentioned, Nick, a 3-to-1 ratio of what it was at jobs
to housing.
Jobs to housing. So, how many units do you think are needed in Burbank?
8,772. That's what we need to do.
8,772, according to Rita?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and by the way, on that note, the reason why you're having complaints in Burbank about projects that can go through, get approved without any planning commission review is because we didn't build the housing. If we build that RENA number, unless and until RENA is reformed, we have to get out from under the thumb of SB 35. And I'm looking at the mall, I'm looking at the IKEA, I'm looking at the old Kmart. Those are pretty darn good to house people for me. Close to jobs, walkable to transit, it makes sense.
Okay. Would you like to respond to that, Tony?
Well, I'm just not a big fan of, and I know that area quite well. It's already crowded as it is, right? And I don't think we should crowd it more. I know you're talking about public transportation, but I'm fairly certain that not everybody's gonna use public transportation anytime soon, right? So, and close to work, yes, and I get the fact that there's a lot of people in the industry, but let's keep in mind that the industry is moving, right?
We're not gonna let it move.
Well, I hope
Hopefully that's a question we can talk about. We're not letting the entertainment industry leave
Hopefully
California.
you're right, that you're not gonna let it move, but.
We're not gonna let it.
My point is that we can't continue to build and build and build in a city, we just can't. We gotta use the land that we have available that's cheaper to build on, because Burbank land is expensive land, and you know this already, right? We need to take these projects somewhere where it's cheaper to build, where we can move these people into their house.
And I want to make sure that we're getting equal time.
We're
Oh.
fine.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Good moderator.
Love to have
It takes so little to get my vote.
If only I'd known. I'm kidding, Tess.
Actually, it's very hard to get my vote. So, and just out of curiosity, how many here are undecided right now?
On what race?
On the
This-
candidates. Okay. All right, you know who
Okay.
to talk to then.
All right. Thank you all for coming out.
And by the way, each candidate has literature which they can make available at the table in the back for anybody who may wish it. All right? So, homelessness is what's driving the so-called housing crisis. I call it so-called because our association doesn't believe it's a true crisis. So, how many homeless people are there in California right now? Tony, do you know? You don't, if you don't, it's all
I mean,
right.
I don't know the exact number, I know it's over 100,000.
Okay, good guess, that's correct. Nick, do you know?
I don't know, but I would have had the same guess.
All right. But a large part of Nick's, your position is that we need affordable housing,
Yeah.
for workers, for homeless, for whom?
Oh my gosh, that's a fantastic
And you
question.
have 2 minutes, and then you get to
All
the
right.
bud.
So let's talk about affordable housing. I don't know about all of you, but I'm sick and tired of seeing these projects go up with all luxury level housing. And by luxury, I mean, of course, $3,000, $4,000+ a month to rent. That's not sustainable for anyone. Now, I was a big fan of Jerry Brown when he was governor. Didn't agree with everything that he did, but he righted the budget. But there was one thing that he did that I thought was, I get why he did it in the short term, but it was incredibly short-sighted. When we had redevelopment agency funding, let me tell you what we did in our community. We used that funding. We partnered with the Burbank Housing Corporation, which is a nonprofit, still exists to this day, that manages.
Excuse me, that would have been would have been during the term of Jerry Brown.
Yes, when he was
Okay.
governor. I'm
Got it.
sorry, I should have.
Go ahead.
He did away with it to write the budget, among many other reasons. But when we had access to that funding, the Burbank Housing Corporation used it to develop hundreds of truly affordable units of housing. Jerry Brown makes a decision with the stroke of a pen, the budget is changed, the redevelopment agency funding dries up, and overnight, Burbank Housing Corporation is left with no money to construct new affordable housing units. The reason I think that that is so critical is once we take care of the first order of business, which is writing the state budget, we have to have a committed revenue stream for nonprofit entities and local jurisdictions, because the model that we have right now, and again, lots of disagreement, but one point of agreement, is that I do think the model that we're getting out of Sacramento right now is very short-sighted in one regard. We are relying on private developers to build all the low and very low income housing that we need. And we do it largely through an extraction process, right? If you build a project with 10%, you can get this, and this caveat in exchange. They're gonna do the bare minimum because it's a business. They're trying to make a bottom line. You're never gonna build enough truly affordable units of housing. We have to go back to the drawing board and we have to get a committed revenue stream so that we can actually build affordable housing to complement the higher prices that developers are gonna build.
Time. Okay, Tony?
Well, I have a different view. It's fine to build affordable housing for the homeless people, but we gotta have some kind of, and I've talked about this before, a wraparound program. Because we have to figure out why they're really homeless. Some are homeless because of drugs, there's mental issues, and some just really wanna be homeless. They just don't want a place to stay. Prime example is how many hotel rooms we have open right now in LA County. We got, I think it's like, the number is in the 20,000.
A lot.
So they're not being used, right? So some people just want to be homeless. But if we're going to take care of the homeless issue, whether it's for work or anything, we need to have some kind of program in place to take care of the people so that when we build a home, they want to stay in the home, right? Whether it's a drug issue, take care of it. Kind of like when we send people to prison, we don't do anything about the real issue. We arrest them, we put them, incarcerate them, put them in jail, then we let them go and they do the same thing over again. Same thing with homeless. We got to do something. If they have a mental issue, then let's take care of that mental issue. And let's give them counseling, some therapy, right? If they have a drug issue, let's put them through a drug rehab program before we give them housing. Let's make it work. Let's talk to family members and let's talk to the local community. We have people that I'm fairly certain will volunteer to help, but we're not asking anybody to help. We just want to solve everything with writing a check and saying, here, this is going to fix everything. Well, money doesn't fix everything. Money is I'm not saying it's evil, I'm just saying it doesn't solve a problem. Writing a check like we've been doing since the 90s in California has not solved a damn thing in the state.
Very good.
Do you have more questions on homelessness? Because
Yes.
I thought that one was on, okay, I'll wait for that. I thought it was on housing. My bad.
It was on homelessness and housing.
Okay.
If I, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth depending on how you guys answer my questions.
Totally.
So, but to answer the question, in the state of California, the best number we have is 186,000 per an amalgamation of all the continuum of care counts, which is an 8% increase from the last continuum of care count report in 2022.
Explain what care is for those.
Explain
Annual, yeah.
what care is.
The annual care account.
The continuum of care count, honestly, I'm not exactly sure, but it's amalgamation of the counts for the various agencies statewide. Do you have something more specific to add on the continuum of care counts?
The continuum of care count, no, I think you described it as well as I did.
So, and in the county of Los Angeles, there are estimated between 71 and 139,000 homeless, depending on which agency you look at. In the city of Los Angeles, there are over 45,000 homeless, according to the 2023 PIT count. And in the county of Los Angeles, a second count was 75,000. So, Nick, I saw in your materials that you wanted to recommend a way in which to address this count and create a system. What are the sources and tools currently available, and what would you do to change them?
And we're talking about homelessness.
Homelessness.
Okay, 2 minutes, I'll try my best. So right now we have our point-in-time homeless count. We have volunteers and community members that go out once a year and as best we can try to identify those who are unhoused in our community. I do agree with you, Tony, on one point. There's no one reason that people are unhoused in our community. Some are fleeing domestic violence, some are veterans in need of service connection, some are dealing with years of untreated mental health or substance abuse, and you can't treat that problem, like a lot of problems, with a one-size-fits-all solution. So I agree with you on the importance of wraparound services. And what I've seen out of City of LA, with all due respect, I'll give Mayor Bass this. She's trying to actually address a problem that I think happened under the watch of a lot of local leaders for years and years and years and got compounded, and now she's trying to do something about it. The problem is we're spending a lot of money to move the problem indoors, but without the wraparound services and treatment, it's never going to work. We have to treat the underlying cause for why people are unhoused in our community. Now, we're seeing leadership at the county level, we're seeing leadership at the city level, but this is a statewide problem. Over 180,000, you said?
Yes.
Over 180,000 people are unhoused in California, and they're not all here in the greater LA area. We can't build all of this infrastructure to address a statewide problem. We need the state to lead on this. Every community in California, whether it's the North Coast or the Central Valley, has unhoused persons in their community. They too need to build the infrastructure. And that is where the state can lead in terms of helping them with planning and programming assistance and dollars. But whether you're in Kern County, Humboldt County, or Los Angeles County, you have to take care of your affairs, you have to build that infrastructure, and do it in a way that actually connects people to housing and services. And one last point, look, not everyone is going to have success in those programs, but in my community, in the last 3 years, we've seen a decline of 9, almost 10%, followed by 6%, followed by 5%. So in Burbank, I'm going to bring that local government experience. We know how to solve the problem, and we've been doing it.
Very good. Tony?
Well, I'll tell you, just like in the last debate, since you're doing so well in Burbank, please share the information.
I do.
With Karen Bass.
I really do.
Share it with Karen Bass because she needs all the help she can get. And look, we agree on a few things and we disagree on some things. Not really disagree. We have the same goal in mind, but the idea to let the government continue to do what they're doing is wrong. We can't do that. We can't not. It has not worked. We need to reach out to people that know what to do with people with mental health issues, people with drug issues, right? And I know that we don't want to lock people up because we violate their rights, but at some point we have to do something to help these people. And if it means signing them over to a state facility to get treatment, we need to do that for them. We owe people that. You know, again, I'm a veteran, and if I saw one of my buddies bleeding, I'm not going to leave him behind. I'm going to do my damnedest to fix him. I don't care what regulation I violate. I don't care what the mission is. People should always come first. The mission is always for the leadership, but people should always come first. And I think that's what we're really lacking. We're really not taking care of our people. We're putting Band-Aids on everything, but we're not really doing anything. We're not being very transparent with what we're doing. We're telling you we're doing these things, but are we really doing them? Are we being transparent? Are we showing you what we're doing with your money? Those are the questions that you need to ask of your leaders. Because if this thing's not working, then the leadership is failing us. And not you personally, but the leadership in Sacramento is failing us. And we need to hold them accountable. And in order to fix anything, we got to find out what's really going on, not what they tell us is going on.
All right, so thank you. I have a question about HUD and then the incompetence of the handling of homelessness solution. So let's start with you. HUD, Housing and Urban Development, which is a federal agency, has made Housing First its official funding policy in 2009, and the state followed suit in 2016. So that's our current policy in the state of California. In that same period, homelessness has increased dramatically despite ever-increasing budgets at all levels of government. So what is your view, Tony, of Housing First as a homelessness solution?
Well, again, I go back to what I said a few minutes ago. People should come first, right? In order to kind of solve the housing issue, we got to take care of our people. And I'm a firm believer in the wraparound program, whether it's with people that commit crimes or people that are homeless. We need to really, if we truly want to solve the issues, we actually have to help people. And in order to help them, sometimes we got to make decisions for them that might not be in their mind in their best interest, but it is in their best interest. Think about if you have a family member that's in alcohol abuse or drugs, right? Sometimes you got to have the family sit around and say, you know what, you're going to rehab, because they're not in the right frame of mind to listen to anything. So we got to force people in order to take care of them. And I know that doesn't sound right in a lot of ways, but I mean it in a kind way. We got to just help people in order to solve the homeless problem. Because we're not going to solve it with putting more money or following HUD's philosophy or LASA's philosophy for that matter.
So change the Mental Health Conservancy laws?
Yes.
Okay. Nick?
Yeah, so directly answer your question, HUD program, I disagree with the approach. I'm not going to use the full 2 minutes. I think this is one of the rare points of common ground. I think we need not just a housing first approach, but a housing plus services approach. Because if you're not putting the money invested into housing programs that also have those wraparound services, again, you're expending a lot of money to move a problem elsewhere, but you're not actually solving it. So that's what I'd have to say on that.
Very good. Thank you for brevity. So, homelessness and bad management. Okay. Why has the plight of homelessness become the #1 priority for the entire state of California to the exclusion of the rights of every other citizen, and how can that possibly be sustainable? There's not a single person here who doesn't want fair and humane treatment for anybody who may need it. But especially when the supposed solutions have been so incompetently administered and so much taxpayer funding has been grossly and negligently wasted. Nick.
Well, thank you for the question. I would say that when you look at homelessness, the state's approach to homelessness in general, we have missed the mark in one really critical way. I do not view this as a binary or a black and white choice. So my wife Allie's here, and we walk with our kids in the community all the time. And it disturbs me as much as it probably bothers many of you when I see someone who is passed out on the sidewalk or camping in the park.
Yes.
It's a humanitarian crisis. And so here's my point. You as a citizen should be able to make use of and enjoy the public spaces as much as anyone. And it's also a humanitarian crisis that people are living and quite literally dying on the streets of the world's fourth largest economy. I'm offended by that. That is patently unacceptable to me. Now, one thing you said, Tony, and I think we're in alignment on this, but I want to be clear. Yes, in terms of conservancy laws, I support recent efforts to change it, but we always have to balance the rights of private citizens. And what I mean by that is, yes, we need to get these people into treatment programs, and yes, we should have more tools to do that. But I'm always wary when we start talking about abridging the Bill of Rights and abridging the rights of people. So we just have to be very careful in going down what I think can quickly become a slippery slope, especially if you start watching the tone and tenor of the debate in Sacramento the last time that this came up. What I would just, in the few probably seconds I have left, look, homelessness is an enormous issue facing California, and I'm going to bring my local government experience. When someone complains to me about someone camping in the park, I view that as an issue of concern for the unhoused person and the person making the complaint. And again, we need to be solving the problem, and it goes with restructuring how we fund local governments and nonprofits and private programs, and requiring not only that they're spending the money in the thoughtful, intelligent way of having wraparound services, but there's also strategic planning and accountability and oversight for how the dollars are spent, and that is where the state can play a larger role.
Time.
Very good, thank you. I just did some quick math, so according to the most current figures I have, the homeless population currently is less than 1/2% in California. But so much legislation is bound up with, this problem, and a great deal of funding.
That's not fair.
What's that?
100,000, I think is the
100,000?
100,000 out of 40 million. 40,000 out of 40 million. No, you're right.
Less than half of 1%. And audience questions, keep them coming, and we'll get to those in just a moment. So, one issue, we need to be clear on numbers too, the vacancy rate. And in this district, we're in Council District 2, which is a city district. That, of course, is a subset of the county and the state. We have enough space and beds and housing for every homeless person in this district. And that is per Paul Krikorian, our council member, as of July last year. He said so. Why are there still homeless people in this district? It's because they don't want it, all right? That is another issue that we have to look at. So before a declaration of a homeless crisis was made, they didn't bother to look at that and the vacancy rate. So I just want to, share that data, which I think is very, very important. And over to parking and over-densification.
Did Tony get a chance to answer the last question?
I'm so sorry. Go ahead. I do apologize.
Look, homelessness issue has become a bank for the state of California, right? It's become a bank, right? I'm just going to give you an example. I work in construction, so I know a lot about the contracts that are being bid and who's bidding and who's getting the contracts. There's a lot of project labor agreements out there that they use. If you're going to build in the city of LA or LA County, it's going to be a project labor agreement. That's going to increase the cost of building anything in California. So there's money going on. These contracts, and I know we're going to disagree here, these contracts, I've been to the bidding sessions. I know I'm there, I know I'm not going to get it, but I know who's going to get it already up front, right? And that's the kind of nonsense that happens. There's a lot of money involved in homelessness, right? Everybody wants to solve it at our level. I don't think anybody wants to solve it up there. I think up there's a money laundering machine up there. And
all right. Anything more on that?
no, I'm good.
Okay. Very good.
Well said, well said.
So, yeah, to that point, there was, for those who've been following the audit of Judge Carter's federal court, you may know that his audit team can't verify performance or service numbers or what providers are doing for the money that they received. Nor is there a consistent definition of what comprises a contact or service, yet the money keeps rolling in. So Tony, will you listen to voters and taxpayers who are fed up with this abysmal performance of these nonprofits, or will you continue to pour taxpayer money into these dysfunctional nonprofits?
No, I will not. My first target would be LASA.
Okay.
We need to dig deep into LASA and find out what they're doing with all the money. You know, those board members are making over $400,000 each, right, in LASA, right? So what are they doing for that money, right? That's why I believe LASA should be an elected position. It shouldn't be somebody appointed by any politician, because the problem with that is they're gonna owe a favor to somebody else, and that's the problem. There's just so much corruption going on in the state of California, even at the lowest level that's going on. We need to put a stop to that, and we need to demand that the state is transparent with us. I'm sure the state can put a spreadsheet online for us to look at where the money's going on a monthly basis. Yeah, it might be a little bit tough because they're understaffed in Sacramento, but they can do it. They can sure in hell do it, right? They can put out a form where people can tell where the money's going, what organizations that are so-called nonprofits are really doing with the money, instead of keep putting in. I am not a fan of the nonprofits we got working on the homeless issue now, or homelessness. So my task would be, and not necessarily go after them, but have my state attorney general here
I think he's promoting me. This is great.
doing his job and going after these people out there.
More career stability.
I'm just going to focus on this job. How about that?
All right, is that,
That's it.
okay, thank you. And now I've lost track. Did you get to answer that question?
So for the sake of time, I'll just be brief. I'm going to take a different track and a different approach. I love where you're going with it, Tony, but this is the one time you might hear me talk about less government. I don't know that you're going to have a better result if you make it an elected position, because you know what we're going to do? We're just going to see more pork barrel stuffing in terms of budgeting, and you're going to see more influence in elections in terms of who people are supporting to get on that board. I think that your better route is talking about term limits, like one-time appointments without an opportunity to re-up. And I take more the approach of we need reform and oversight and accountability. I do agree that every dollar of public funding should be traceable and trackable, and I think there's much more room for improvement there.
Term limits is a very good question. But I'm going to just mention that in April of this year, the state auditor released a report showing the state, despite spending $24 billion on homelessness in the last 5 years, can show no empirical evidence that the expenditures have had any effect on homelessness. But we have plenty of empirical evidence of the money squandered, mismanaged, the utter infuriation of the electorate. So specifically, the report said that the state Interagency Council on Homelessness has not been holding the continuum of care agencies like LASA accountable for failing to report required program performance measures. So that question has already been answered. Thank you very much. And there's a concern, at least in this district, that the current system is creating a permanent underclass of people who will be totally dependent on this vast and expensive bureaucracy that keeps getting bigger and more costly. And for what it's worth, in my many interactions with LASA to try to help unhoused people, I have never once been satisfied. All right, so let's see. Nick, this is a specific question for Nick.
Okay.
You claim in your campaign materials a 10% decline in homelessness. What exactly did you do, and over what period of time was that?
Thank you for the question. Just to clarify, it was 9.8%, followed by a 6%, followed by a 5%, and that would have been in the 2022, 2023, and 2024 homeless count. So all since the pandemic, if you will.
Okay.
With the remainder of my time, how we approached it. So we looked deep into the data because we wanted to be intelligent and thoughtful in how we're spending public funds. For example, we could build a shelter, and we are working on one, but I'm going to come back to that. We could, but we had to understand who's actually unhoused in our community. 60% of those who are unhoused in Burbank live in their car. That's significant because that's the only home, the only stability that they know. And so my point is, you can spend money having a big fancy shelter, you're never going to get them out of the car. at least not initially. So we started looking at how can we spend a fraction of the money, with all due respect, that City and County of LA are doing, and be effective in the use of the money. So we started looking at creating a safe storage program where those who are unhoused could safely access and store their personal effects, access showers, access wraparound services. We spent a fraction of the money of City of LA and saw people that took to the program because they were willing to walk through that door. They didn't have to say goodbye to their home initially, but through that process, we were able to get them connected with services, and many did get placed in the program. So it's being innovative and collaborative. We also partnered with our business community to create a downtown Burbank ambassador program to clean it up, to make it nice and accessible for everyone who wants to access it. But also it's all about gathering information. Who are these people? What is their story? Where do they come from? How do they find themselves unhoused? It's about being thoughtful and intelligent and specific case by case in the approach. Last thing I'll say with any time I have remaining, in terms of this homeless solution center that we're talking about building next year, we're going to have safe parking spots available there because, again, it's all data driven. We're trying to be effective in using dollars to actually solve the problem that exists rather than one that we think that we exist. And Tony, I am sharing all these solutions with Mayor Bass and Mayor Satrian and everyone who will listen.
No,
Okay.
I'm glad you're finally going to share the information.
I've been doing it, Tony, for a whole
You're
year.
not listening then.
Okay, all right. Infrastructure and parking. Parking first, and over-densification. We want very much our new assembly member to eliminate loopholes in a new law that set out to close loopholes left by AB 2097 in 2022, a law passed by Laura Friedman, current assembly member, that prohibits public agencies from imposing minimum parking requirements on certain residential and other developments located within 1/2 mile of public transit. So, are you prepared, and let's start with Tony, to learn about this issue and to carry a bill to correct this problem? Do you really want developers demolishing duplexes and single-family home neighborhoods to put up 20-unit apartment buildings with 0 parking and force occupants? You can sense how the crowd feels, just a little bit. Do you really want developers demolishing single-family home neighborhoods to put up 20-unit apartment buildings with 0 parking and force occupants to park on our already overcrowded residential neighborhood public streets? This new law, AB 2712, has a parking exemption for luxury developments of 20 units or less, which would mean up to 60 parking permits if this isn't stopped. Are you committed to doing something about that and to fixing it, Tony?
I am very committed to that. There's a group in Southern Tahunga, actually I think La Crescenta, that fought off that same issue where they took the Verdugo Hills golf course away. They were going to build condos there in the street. I don't know if you're familiar with Lowell and Latuna Canyon, but the very narrow streets. And they were going to build where the golf course was condos and apartments. And a group of people fought for that, and they won. They won that battle. Now,
Was that specifically related to parking?
yes,
Okay.
because of parking.
Fire safety.
And fire safety too, by the way. My big concern is people like Laura Friedman are passing bills without really speaking to the constituents about what bills she's interested in passing, and not informing us what bills are there. One thing I will tell you is, there's no secrets with me. I'll tell you like it is, whether you like it or not. I'm not gonna hide any bill from you. One thing I will do, I will not sign a bill without, getting some information. I will not initiate a bill without having my information. I will not do anything that I think is gonna affect my neighborhood. I don't want Southern Tahunga to become downtown Los Angeles. I want it to stay the way it is. We don't have a lot of parking as it is, and anytime anybody comes to Tahunga to try to build something, we're gonna fight. And we fought the one with Denny's Restaurant. They wanted to do the same thing, Denny's Restaurant, and we pushed them back. We're not gonna let people just come in because they're friends with somebody in the state of California and build something.
Parking. So as I recall the call of the question, it is, would I be committed to working with you all, learning about it, and potentially carrying a bill?
And correcting that bill or carrying a new one to correct it?
I am absolutely committed to learning more, and I will say from my community, yes, I do think there's room for improvement in the bill. Let me talk about one specific project that we have in Burbank. It's going up, it's going up on Empire, near the Empire, Burbank Empire Center. It's 147 units, all affordable, which is a great thing, but only 7 units of parking that is required. To me, that is unacceptable. That is unacceptable. No, it's 100% true, 7 units. And by the way, when we went through that process, folks rightfully came forward to the council and they were upset, and yet we couldn't do anything under the state law. So I do think that there's room for improvement, absolutely.
What is affordable? When you say they're affordable?
Oh, and that project, it was all low or very low income, so below the median threshold of income in the area. So I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but what was that?
I was joking, I said below 500,000.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, these are also apartments, so I think you'd find them for like less than 1,500. But whatever the number is, clearly 7 units of parking space, only one of which was for those with disabilities to accept. I mean, it's not going to meet the needs of that community. So yes, we have to take another look at 2097. I believe you mentioned.
I believe it was, yes.
Okay, and I know there was some preceding law before that. But what I will say though is this: it's all about balance. At the end of the day, the reason they looked at it in the first place is that there's a lot of drivers to the cost of housing, and this is where we will disagree, Tony. It's not all labor, and we can have a difference of opinion, but I don't think we should use working people as a scapegoat for the cost of housing. There are hard costs to housing, including parking. And what we had under prior law is you had 2 parking spaces or 3 parking spaces per unit. That's not going to work any more than having 7 units for 147 is going to work. And this is where my local government tie-in comes in. I fundamentally do think that those on planning commissions and city councils, you have a pretty darn good idea of the needs of your community. I think the state legislates with the stick a lot of the time. We need a little bit more carrot in terms of incentive and help for local jurisdictions to do the right thing.
Okay.
I'd like to respond.
Okay, go ahead. And
As long as I can have a retort.
Yeah, you can. All right, so keep it short.
I will. So, I'm not attacking the working class, don't get me wrong, okay? I'm attacking the project. If we're gonna spend money on building affordable housing, then we need to make it as cheap as possible to build. And when you have project labor agreements, and you have prevailing wage salaries being given to it, it's a lot more expensive to build something. That contractor's gonna have to add his markup to all that, and that's extremely high. So it's not the working class, because just because you're not a union member doesn't mean you're not a working class. Right? I'm not a union member, I work my ass off every freaking day, right? So when you say those things, be very careful what you're gonna say.
Okay, Nick, go ahead.
So let me say, as the grandson of a machinist and the son of a mechanic, I know all about working people, Tony. Now here's what I will say. There are hard costs to housing, and I don't think that by eroding labor standards and not paying people a fair, livable, prevailing wage, that's not the answer. You want to speed up the process? The way you speed up the process and cut the cost is, you know what the biggest driver of cost is, even more than supply chain issues, even more than the land, it's the time. It's the time that it takes to get one project through a planning commission or council. Of all the projects I talked about earlier that we've entitled, I stand corrected, one has broken ground because of regulation, because of the wait time. That drives cost more than anything, because you're sitting with land and you're spending money to build it up for the course of 4 years and you're not able to turn a profit. If we can do something about wait times and delays, that will do much more to decrease the cost of housing production in California than anything.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. Just anecdotally regarding costs and fees, in preparing for this program tonight, I learned that, and are you aware that in the last few years, the state has passed legislation that has added over $100,000 in fees per unit that includes houses and apartments in environmental and other permits. This is pretty crazy. I didn't get a chance to dig further. It's possible that that is in part paying for infrastructure, but over $100,000 in fees added to each unit built in the state of California. And secondarily, when the tiny home villages were built, starting in North Hollywood, there was some concern about that, but particularly in the cost. Okay, and I looked into the cost at the time, more than 50% of the cost were in fees to the city, permits, and licensing, not labor and not materials. And that is a problem, okay? For the government entity that states that it wants to build affordable housing and is jacking up the fees itself, it's hard to take that seriously. No comment needed on that.
I do have a quick thought on that, and maybe
Okay.
Tony would respond, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Now, I haven't looked at the information that you pulled, but that sounds a lot like development impact fees. These are the fees that you pay to help with infrastructure upgrades and, for all the units of housing.
I'm not sure because I didn't look further, and that could be the case.
I'll just say that is Nick's opinion, not speaking for Tess, but if it is, if we want common sense approaches to our housing problem, if we want to have housing on an old IKEA site and not demolish the house next door, by the way, and have 8 units back there, here's how you do it. Offer them development impact fee relief. Steer the development to where the housing should go. And again, the only reason that hasn't been done is you have a lot of folks in Sacramento thinking abstractly about the problem, but unless you've sat on a planning commission, looked at a project, heard the concerns of the community, and looked at those real costs, and Tony, I know you've obviously thoughts on that too with your background, unless you have that lived experience and approach, you're not going to have sensible housing policy. So hopefully one of the two of us can at least add some common sense up there.
Impact fees are ridiculous. That's all I'm gonna say about that. They're all ridiculous. They call it for environmental reasons. Let's get real, it's not about the environment.
Anything further?
No,
Okay.
it's just robbery.
All right.
Can I ask a question?
No, but you can write one out and bring it forward. All right?
It just doesn't,
Okay, write out your question, bring it forward, please. Okay. I'm going to keep this rolling, and I got a couple more questions before we go. We have some really good audience questions. Eleanor,
Yes.
would you be so kind and get a pen and paper over to
I
Deborah?
already have it.
Ah,
I already
okay.
have it. Yeah.
So, money. Nick, I'm sorry, let me start with Tony. How do you feel about campaign contributors influencing legislation and voting decisions?
Well, if it was up to me, I would have a set amount of money that each candidate would get from the taxpayers, right? And that's it. Depending on what you're running for, that's what you get. Speaking on my behalf, I'll be honest with you, I made it to the primary with $1,500, right? That's not a lot of money. I can't compete with the professional politicians.
Need a loan? I'm just
But we gotta have some rules in place so that it's a level playing field for everybody. So when we elect somebody, we're electing somebody for what they really stand for, not for who they stand for. Right?
Yes.
Because at some point, you gotta figure out that you get so much money from different people, you're gonna be beholden to all those people. You're not gonna be beholden to the people that you're supposed to be representing in Sacramento. So I just believe that there should be some kind of law that, hey, you're running for city council, you're only getting 20 grand for your campaign. Whoever makes it through the primary, that's all you're gonna get, 20 grand. Fair point.
Nick, same question for you.
So I'm actually really excited tonight because we're finding some more common ground, Tony. I actually agree with you. Publicly financed elections is the only way to really get the influence of money out of politics, but I'll go a half step further. Yes, publicly financed elections, that's critical, but so is ranked choice voting. Look at our primary election, for example. You and I are sitting here. Clearly, a lot of folks in this room liked you.
Excuse me, Nick, what is right choice? voting?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ranked
And I'm a fan of preferred ranked choice voting, so I'll explain that. but there's
Rank choice.
Ranked.
Okay, sorry, I thought you said right.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll slow it down. So I'm a fan of preferred ranked choice voting. If you want to learn more, there's different models of ranked choice voting. There's cumulative voting, but the concept is the same. So in the primary election, maybe you liked Tony, maybe you liked me, but if you didn't vote for one of us and you voted for one of the other candidates, well, maybe you're like, oh my God, I like Tony a lot more than Nick. He's a better second choice. Let's say you're voting for Ed Hahn or whoever, right? They should have that option, because whoever wins this race, how much are we really a reflection of the true political will of this district? So my point, Tony, is I agree with you about the role of money, but if we really want to empower people, why shouldn't they, in our primary, for example, 8 candidates, rank them 1 through 8? say this is my absolute favorite. I like Tony, for example, but if it's not Tony, I'll take someone who's more common sense like Ed or whoever. Until we make that change, we're going to continue to be battling with the influence of money in politics. And here's the last thing I'll say, because you've mentioned it a couple times, Tony, and I do agree with you. Whoever wins this seat is not there to represent Gavin Newsom. They're not there to represent the Speaker of the Assembly. They're here to represent the people of the 44th District. Vote for me or don't vote for me, but look at my track record. Every day I fight for all of you in the courtroom. I always do what I think is the right thing to do, and sometimes that means telling your friends and supporters no, and they're wrong.
I'd like a commitment from both of you, depending on whoever wins, and support from whoever doesn't win, to put something like that through. I think everybody, that's a good...
I'll make that commitment right now. That sounds like a great idea.
Nonpartisan issue that would benefit everybody. So, you brought up the fiduciary responsibility, Nick, so you start with this.
Sure.
What is your understanding of your fiduciary duty as a representative of the people of this district and of the people themselves? Do you feel it's your responsibility to do whatever you want to do when elected because it's your mandate, or do you feel you're there as a fiduciary representative? And this goes to the core of our democracy.
I absolutely love the question. All the questions have been great, but this one is probably, in my view, the most important tonight. I tend to fall into the camp of it's a fiduciary responsibility. What does that mean? My job is to listen to you and to reflect your will in Sacramento as legislation and budgets are passed down. Now, it's not a direct democracy. Sometimes the people, in my view, cannot have all the information or be misinformed about the right policy choice. But you should not be approaching the job saying, well, this is what I think is the right thing to do or what benefits me or my supporters. That's absolutely the wrong way to approach it. The way to do it is through outreach, robust outreach, connection with your community. Whether it was Assemblymember Nazarian, Senator Portantino, who are representing part of this area, there are a lot of electeds to choose from. I think you were talking about Congressman Brad Sherman, his telephone town hall. I love that model. You can't send someone to Sacramento and say, we trust you to do all the right decisions and come back and report back in 2 years. It doesn't work that way. Whoever's in this seat needs to have communion with the community. We need to be back in district, and I'm going to be back in district midweek every week. Yes, to see my family and my kids, which will be a nice treat, but also to remain grounded in the community that I represent. To be at everything from clam bakes to street fairs, that's important, because here's the point. You may call, you may email a district office just as much as you might go to a council meeting and stand at the podium before the council. But I bet that if I come to you and we have a cup of coffee in the community, you're probably going to feel more comfortable, you're going to be able to exchange your ideas, you're going to share your concerns. That's the job, is to elevate the concerns of this district, whether it's the potential erosion of the entertainment industry to homelessness on our streets. We have to elevate our concerns and our solutions to the Capitol. That's the job.
Very good. And just one follow-up question for Nick that's specific to Burbank, and then we'll go to you for the fiduciary question. I understand that public comment in Burbank City Council has been recently limited to 1 minute if there's over a certain number of people, 30 or 40 people. Is that true? Public comment.
Yeah, it's 3 minutes if it's 1 through 20 people on a specific issue. Then from 20 to 30, I think it goes down to 2 minutes, or sorry, 20 to 40, it's 2 minutes. And if it's more than 40 people talking about a specific issue, it's 1 minute. That's correct.
We appreciate as much mic time as possible, representing the public. So now over to you, Tony. What is your understanding of your fiduciary duty as a representative of the people of your district and of the people themselves? Same question as Nick.
Well, I'm all about transparency. I want people to know exactly what's going on. I want to know what they think. And I'm a firm believer in communication, right? And I know Nick has heard this before. We need to do a better job of communicating with our constituents. Because my current assembly person, the only time I hear from her is when election season's coming around, right? And I think that's unfair. I think they owe us. And if what Nick says is true, and I'm fairly certain it's true, then if he wins, he'll be super happy to see me at every meeting when he comes down to town.
Tony, her rep is in the back.
Huh?
Her rep is in the back.
I don't care.
Let's unpack everybody.
So What I promise is that I will be very transparent and I will tell you exactly what is on my mind. And I'll tell you exactly what bills are being pushed. It'll be public knowledge. I want to make sure that you know everything. And if something happens on that floor, the committee floor in Sacramento, and they shut my mic off, you'll know why they shut it off. Because I am not going to shut up and let them ramble on whatever decision they want to ramble out to us. Right? I will stay with the community. I do promise that I will have a monthly Zoom meeting with the community where everybody can come and talk to me and tell me what's going on. And I'll tell you exactly what's going on in Sacramento. There will be no secrets with me.
Very good, thank you. And beware goat puppet. For anyone who's been to city council chambers, as I
Talking
have.
about Wayne, right?
Yeah. So there's a famous gadfly who attends city council meetings, and he's just the most ribald and rather funny and uncouth guy. Anyway, so before we go, I have one just comment, and then I'm going to take audience questions. We've got a lot of really good ones, and I'm glad to see there's similar concerns, which is good. So for those of you seated here tonight, I want to make sure everyone here is aware of Article 1 in the Declaration of Rights of the California Constitution. It is so incredibly critical, and it ties into what I just asked our candidates about their fiduciary duty. Section 3A, quote, it's one sentence: the people have the right to instruct their representatives, petition government for redress of grievances, and assemble freely to consult for the common good, end quote. So whoever gets elected, we're not sending them to Sacramento to do whatever the hell they feel like doing. We're going to instruct them. And I take them at their word that they will listen to us. All right, so concerns about protecting our single-family neighborhoods from developers. We're seeing a wholesale destruction, and what are plans to densify this area, in particular Greater Toluca Lake, and this area of Assembly District 44. We have several residents here tonight who are suffering from large-scale multifamily unit buildings going up right next to them, which has historically been an R1 neighborhood. And also, we'll start with that. Let's start with you, Tony.
Well, as I said earlier, I'm not a fan of all this construction everywhere and destroying the neighborhoods, the single-family homes. What built America was a single-family homes, not apartments in every corner, not building, where they shouldn't be building. We have a lot of open areas in California. We have a whole desert full of open area that we're not using. I don't see why the state is pushing all this. And I know it's part of a cover to pretend they care about the community and they care about homeless people, because they don't. We need to put a stop to that. And the only way to do it is if we stick together and we take it to Sacramento. And I might not be able to solve it alone, but if enough of you in the 44th district follow me to Sacramento and keep pushing those buttons, and if the governor doesn't do his job, and Robert, and I forget his last name, the speaker for the assembly, we got to show them by numbers what we're about. We can't let them just shut off our microphone and you don't hear about what's happening in Sacramento. They shut the microphone off a lot on people because they're pushing back. There's actually been physical fights in Sacramento in the assembly because people can't agree. These are grown adults. At some point, we need to stand up, shake hands, and do what's best for the community. And building in neighborhoods that are single-family homes is not the answer. That's not going to solve our homeless issue.
Well, thank you, and Tony, I agree with you. We have to find a way to disagree without being disagreeable. We need a lot more of that. And look, we clearly have different visions for California, but at least I appreciate that we're sitting down and talking tonight. So here's my thought on that. I want a day where every Californian can achieve the dream of single-family home ownership. This is not an either-or choice. It's an all the above. Yes, I'm going to sound like a broken record. And by the way, I know there are plenty of you in the room who don't agree with me. That's fine. But Tony likes to talk about how he's going to be straight shooter. Well, me too. I'm going to tell you my solution to the housing crisis. And by the way, I know it works, and it will work. So here's my thought. You want to have more housing in proximity to where people work. That's the goal. And that's why I keep coming back to this idea of these vacant, underutilized, dead spaces in our community. Why do you want to do that? It's going to be smart, intelligent infill design that does not conflict with single-family residential. It actually solves the housing crisis. And by the way, when we talk, one thing we did not talk about tonight was greenhouse gas emissions, climate change, which I do believe in. You know what the single biggest driver of our greenhouse gas emissions is in California? Transportation. People driving from where they can live, like Lancaster, into LA where they can work. You want to take more cars off the road? The answer isn't necessarily mandating the sale of EVs and building our EV infrastructure. Allow people to live in proximity to where they work. And that's why I'm so high on this concept of we have spaces in our communities. In your neighborhood, I think the Home Depot bought that location, it's sitting vacant. What a great site for housing. Steer the development there. It's thoughtful, it's intelligent infill, and you can do that. You can add more housing opportunity, more condominiums, more townhomes, God willing, more things for sale under $1 million so that our kids and grandkids could own something, build a little equity, and have the American dream that many of us have achieved. We can do all of that and preserve what we love about our neighborhoods. And to anyone saying that it's a dichotomous choice, that's just a blatant lie.
Very good. Now, thank you, Nick. So, how do these people feel here if we cut the response time for each one to 1 minute so we can get more Q&A?
Yes.
Do you feel good about that? All right.
Just like Sacramento.
Okay, you're hereby authorized. Okay.
15 seconds.
At the time in half. All right, so the over-densification of our beloved neighborhoods is a huge concern for this community. It appears that the state only wants to build where it's highly dense already, where there's no more land to expand to, with the possible exception of these commercial spaces like the old IKEA lot. I agree with that, all right? And the resident association agrees with that. But when you have a fully built-out city, why do you or the state try to force more population and density into an already fully built-out community? Why not do the obvious and build new communities where the land is plentiful and inexpensive? And jobs can be created there as well. And why would you want to build homeless housing, particularly in the most expensive zip code in the country, if not in the world, unless the real purpose is to profit real estate developers, investors, and the construction industry? If that's the purpose, then of course it makes sense, but it doesn't explain, it explains but not excuse. But it's unacceptable and it's making life hell for the rest of us. I have a transit-oriented community question now. For those of you who may not be aware, TOC, the abbreviation for transit-oriented community, there have been laws passed that enable higher density when they are closer to so-called transit hubs. Although we've seen the definition of transit hub get a little bit wobbly depending on who's interpreting it. So our neighborhood here, particularly in West Toluca Lake, is included as a transit neighborhood. How will you maintain the high quality of life that we've carved out for ourselves and tried to maintain in our beloved and tranquil neighborhood? Tony.
Well, I think we need to go to Sacramento and create bills, write a bill up that, you know, I'm a big fan of the nuclear family, right? I'm old school when it comes to that. I believe that single family housing is the solution to a lot of problems we have in the state of California. And I say that because if you have a stable family, more than likely you won't have any other issues where you'll be homeless or you'll have any mental issues or even drug issues, right? Because if you have a stable family home, your life is pretty stable. It's not going to change, right? And when you start bringing outsiders in, you know, in Tujunga, Tujunga's an old neighborhood, right? We keep fighting to stop people from building in Tujunga because we don't want to change the view of the mountains that we have. We don't want to change, we don't want to have to move the animals out of Summit Tujunga because we're building.
Time?
I know, it's a lot harder with the 1 minute, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You guys average about a minute and a half in your answers.
All right, okay.
Okay.
We can do it, that's fine, I'll be short. I'm not going to add much to what I've already said. I think that I have charted at least my vision for how you can add infill housing in a way that makes sense without compromising entire communities. What I will say is, yes, the idea, the concept of building more out in the desert or in Lancaster is great. Here's the problem. Are we going to build the transportation infrastructure that we need to move people across large distances to? That's going to be a critical part of the solution. We need more rail. We need more dedicated lines. And the problem is that's also going to be expensive to construct and slow to construct. And if you're building housing out there that no one will live in because they can't go where they're working, that too, in my view, is a waste of resources and money.
I will.
That's fantastic. We should talk. And I have thoughts on transportation too. But one last thing, Tony. I don't know what you meant by it, but I just want to say this. I wasn't raised in a nuclear family. My brother and I were raised by a single mom. I think we turned out pretty damn well, and I think we were pretty stable. So I support families of however they look, all shapes and sizes. And I think anyone should too.
Thank you. There's concerns about the entertainment industry, and very much. What are you going to do to help keep the entertainment industry here in California and business in general? Nick, let's start with you.
1 minute or less. California Film Industry Tax Credit. It has been a phenomenal program, but it's already obsolete, even though they just passed program version 5.0. We are being outcompeted by the state of New York, which has doubled the financial commitment, and the state of Georgia, which has imposed no cap on relocating production there. We need to be talking now about the next iteration of the program, and we need to be talking about 3 things specifically. Number one, 75% of productions that apply for the tax credit are turned away because we're already out of money. We do need to double, if not triple, our financial commitment to the program. We also need to expand eligibility for the program. We talk about live production. Animation employs a lot of people in this district too, and they can't take advantage. And by the way, those jobs are leaving right along with everyone. Nickelodeon's gone, Netflix animation is gone. And yes, we have to talk about speeding up the process of navigating government and getting your money. We are an entertainment family. Allie works at one of the studios. Our friends, our neighbors are impacted by this. I plan to lead as a voice for the entertainment industry in our capital.
Okay, very good. Tony, more questions. Tony, entertainment industry, what are you going to do to keep it here?
We definitely need to do more tax incentives for them. We also need to make sure that we streamline the process for permits, because that increases cost for the production. And we also need to think about a lot of the equipment they use, trucks, for example, right? We have this card, California Air Resource Support, right? Who has a lot of restrictions on these vehicles, right? Because of the environment, right? And I get, look, I'm not against protecting the environment, but we have to have a common sense approach to all these things, right? We just can't cut things off. You know, those trucks, it's more expensive to operate the trucks. They're gonna pass that cost on to the production companies if they're using those trucks and transportation. So we need to make sure that we streamline the permit process, number one. And you said it, Georgia is killing us, right?
Yeah.
With how they're doing it. We need to make it, you know, California is one of the most beautiful states in the world. We don't want these guys to go to Nevada.
Okay.
And they will.
Yeah. All right. So this is a question for Nick.
Okay.
Burbank is building near the Amtrak station. How many units are there, and how many of those are low-income Section 8? Do you know?
That's a phenomenal question. The short answer is I don't know. I'll tell you what I do know about the project. That was approved right before I got on council, I think in late 2019 or early 2020. I think we're talking about the Front Street project. Whoever asked the question, when we're done with this, if you want to come find me, I have the information somewhere in an email, but I'll tell you the one thing about that project, they didn't get nearly enough affordable units extracted out of it.
Okay. Who asked the question, if you don't mind? Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'll come and find you at the
All
end.
right.
Thank you for the question.
Not enough. Okay, good. So, is it fair to ask a question about Burbank Airport? That's a joint sort of agency between Glendale, Burbank, and Pasadena.
Yeah. But it falls in our district.
Okay, but will you as state legislators have any say over Burbank Airport, yes or no? Otherwise.
Not the flight path, but
Okay.
other airport operations, like ground transportation, yes, but not the flight path. Not direct influence, but I think Tony or I would commit to advocating to the FAA and our federal representatives who very much can do something about it.
Well, okay, so here, then I'll ask the question because it is something that we're going to be taking up more vigorously here. And for those of you who are affected by the Burbank flight path, Federico, can you stand up? Federico will take your name and number. Turn around, Kevin, the other side. Federico's behind you.
Oh, there you
All right.
go. Hi.
Okay, here's the question, and if you don't know the answer, that's fine. It's a little niche. If takeoffs from Burbank Airport were to be adjusted north, the airlines would save over $33 million a year in fuel costs. Could you comment, and can you help us modify the flight paths? Tony?
I don't know if we can help at that level, but we can influence certain people at the federal level to do that. And if it saves money, it makes sense, right? And it saves on noise, right? I mean, we got to have a common sense approach to the Burbank Airport. Again, the FAA, we don't control at our level in the state, but we can influence some congressmen if you elect the right ones. We could definitely influence them to help us change that.
The only thing I would add is we can certainly talk to our congressional representatives, whether it's a man or a woman. You should talk to both Laura and Alex, who are running to represent this area in the Congress. But it is an FAA issue. The one thing I will say is that we do have a role to advocate, and I view this, while it's not something we have direct purview over, or one of us would, it is very much a quality of life issue. And I have walked every area of this district, from North Glendale to Sunland, Tujunga to Sherman Oaks, and it's one of the top 2 or 3 complaints that I often get. Yes, homelessness is up there too, but there's a lot of concern about the impacts of the flight path. I think we have to be using our soapbox to talk about it.
Okay.
You're doing a study on that, a new study again right now, and it's a 2-year process, so it's already happening, so you guys could call noise control and find out.
Would you make sure that you connect with Federico?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a lot of very good questions. All right. Here's a juicy one. All right. Given the scandals in Los Angeles City Council, and this is very unusual handwriting in DC, and what's that?
Orange County.
Oh, Orange County. Thank you, sir. With the sheriffs, etc. Do we have a systemic problem, and what can and should be done at the state level? Is this a matter of new laws? Why don't you start with that, Nick?
I love the question. In a minute or less, yes, it is a systemic problem. Just look at Los Angeles City Council. Look at them have either committed or been charged with or convicted of a crime. It's outrageous. The solution is threefold. Number one, and I'm glad to see we have common ground here, Tony. Number one is redo how we do elections and campaign financing. That's going to be probably the long-term answer, but the single biggest thing we can do to reduce corruption. We already have plenty of laws on the books, and I know this because I use them. I prosecute elected officials who take bribes, offer bribes, abuse the power and the authority of their office. The issue is always enforcement. And yes, I'm biased, but I absolutely think we need to be investing in the California Department of Justice to go after it, because there's plenty of corruption. The issue is always the expenditure of resources, more investigators, more attorneys to take those big cases, and we can't rely on the U.S. Attorney's Office to take everything that we need. And the last thing is more sunshine laws, Freedom of Information Act, Public Records Act requests. We need to make sure that more information is available to the public.
Thank you. Tony?
Well, we're going to agree here, for sure. We just need transparency, and again, we need voting laws and regulations that limit the money that can be donated to a specific candidate. Because, like in LA, we all know what happened, right? People got a lot of money from certain groups, and they got carried away, and they got special favors. And that happens because of money, right? Money is the root of all evil in politics anyway, right? The more money a candidate gets, the more he's going to owe to those people. Whether he or she says they don't, they have a moral obligation to that organization. Not all of them, but most of them do. And that's what's happening in LA City Council. Look, I'm not a big fan of my council person. I think that when she first came in, She came in good heart, but she's a crook. She's a crook.
Yes, it is.
Do you mind mentioning who that is?
Oh, no, I don't mind at all. Monica Rodriguez. No relation, no relation.
We'll talk a little bit afterward, so thank you.
The only thing I'd add to Tony is, to your point, that law, the writing, it's already on the books. It's a question of enforcement.
Right.
That's the real crux of the issue.
And so you, Nick, think that it's a matter of more money for the California Department of Justice to pursue cases that can actually...
I do, and I'll tell you why. Because for all the cities and counties and state elected officials that are in this state that are probably deserving of prosecution, we have 25 attorneys. 25 in the special prosecution section at DOJ. I can tell you there's a lot more corruption than that needs to be taken on, but that does require an investment. It requires resources.
Tell you what, I'll volunteer, and I'm not an attorney. All right, this is a yes or no answer. Nick, then Tony, do you want California to continue to be a sanctuary state? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, Tony?
No.
All right.
Well, can you ask them both why for 30 seconds?
And since, whoever asked the question, would you like to define what you mean by sanctuary state? I know my definition, but whoever asked the question, let's...
What's your definition?
Letting in.
Okay, so what's your
Letting in
definition?
everybody.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on, folks. All right. Define sanctuary state, then stop, and then we'll start the clock for you. Just define sanctuary state.
My view of it is that a sanctuary state is not going to cooperate with federal law enforcement that has been weaponized to uproot people
Okay,
from their
that's not the
homes.
definition.
That's my definition.
Okay, hold on a second. What is the Kevin, did you ask this question?
I should have.
Okay. Okay. I don't know what the precise definition is, so let's give you 1 minute to respond as to why you said yes, and then you will get your 1 minute as to why you said no. Go ahead.
Very simple. I agree with recent changes in the law. The Trump administration weaponized federal law to tear people out of their communities and tear families apart. Yes, it is. It is absolutely true. You can have your opinion, but this is mine. I approve the recent changes in state law. I will always stand with families standing together, and just because they're not a nuclear family, just because they're not a family that you might like or agree with, doesn't mean I'm not going to defend it.
Even if they're not citizens.
Okay.
I've answered the question, sir. I'm happy to talk to you right outside.
Talk to him afterwards. Okay, I want to get as many questions as possible, although I'm glad to be getting
She's
them.
got 30 seconds left.
Non-citizens, maybe?
I don't either.
Okay, Tony.
Well, my opinion is Americans come first.
Right.
That's not what I mean. It's not that I don't want to help anybody else. And you brought up nuclear family because I did. It has nothing to do with nuclear family, Nick. It has to do with we need to take care of our own first.
Right.
Once we take care of our
So you
own,
support mass deportations?
yes.
Well, there's a choice, folks. If you like mass deportations, Tony. If you don't, me.
Listen, you know what, Nick?
It's his time, give him extra time back.
Nick, it's not about that. We have to take care of our own first.
Tony, you have 40 seconds.
Thank you. We have to take care of our own first. We all take care of our families first before we go take care of our neighbors. We do a very poor job of taking care of our own American citizens and our people that are here legally. We do a horrible job taking care of them. And we need to do a better job. Now, if we take care of our own, I don't have a problem taking care of somebody else. But you got to take care of your own family first before you start handing out funds and money to somebody else.
Thank you very much. And we're coming to the end. Any more questions? Going once, going twice, almost done. All right. So that's been asked.
I thought Debbie had a question earlier, but she didn't get it.
I think she had a question about entertainment, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
All right, so last two questions, unless I get more passed up here. Why are there so many issues that are pro-renter currently being addressed so that homeowners and property owners are being stripped of their voice? Isn't the renter-homeowner-landlord a relationship a symbiotic one where one needs the other to exist? Tony, why don't you take that first?
Well, there's a lot of things that are passed on to the homeowners and property owners that, for whatever reason, we don't want to pass on to the renters. And I get the renter's point of view, don't get me wrong. I rented for a long time. So does a lot of years to buy a home. But it's like anything else in life. Minimum wage goes up. We didn't tell the restaurants they couldn't raise their prices. We couldn't tell them to do anything. The cost came to us. Gas prices go up. We get the increase in the gas tax, right? So to me, it's unfair. We live in a place where, you know what, if you're lucky enough to own 2 or 3 properties and you want to rent them out, then you should be able to, any cost passed on to you by the state or the city or your local community, you should be able to pass it on to the renter. It's not, you're not abusing the renter, it's business. You said that earlier, it's business, right? We go down a slippery slope when we start making up these rules for certain groups. I don't like that restaurant, so I'm gonna close it down. I don't like gun stores, so I'm gonna close that down. We're going down a slippery slope when we do that. We cannot do that. Either follow the Constitution, we have a right to do what we want to do, as long as we don't affect other people, or just go into socialism. There's no other way.
Okay.
Are we at time yet? Okay. All right, thank you. So let me start with the call to the question. You asked about the relationship between landlords and tenants. The short answer is yes. It's a symbiotic relationship. Tony, I agree with you on one point. The capital expenditure pass-through, the idea if you have these hard costs, you should be able to amortize that and pass it along to your tenants. I don't disagree with that. But at the end of the day, here's the problem. If you don't agree that there's a housing shortage, maybe you'll agree that there's an affordability shortage. Not you specifically, just in general. The rents are allowed to go up 8.9% in Los Angeles County. You know what the average wage growth is this year in Los Angeles? 3.6%. It might inch up in 3 years' time to 4.5%. There's a huge growing gap between wage growth and housing. So yes, we have to be talking about rent stabilization and eviction protections, but it's not an us versus them. It's about all the above. And we should have more resources and relief for landlords who are still owed their back due rent. I'm for that too. It's helping lift everybody up. But there absolutely are rising costs that are displacing people. And one last thing, Tony, let's end the name calling. I'm not a socialist.
I think
let's avoid the labeling because that's the worst of all.
Wow.
Okay, guys, we're good, Okay, so, wow, all right, so, I don't want to ask that, that's, okay. Here's one for the ladies, okay. Nick.
Yeah.
What will you do to protect women's spaces like women's sports?
Well, I'll tell you this. I was a proud proponent of Proposition 1. I believe that we need to defend women's rights against the incursion of federal government. I also believe that everyone should be allowed to express themselves, be who they are, be loved and valued for who they are, and practice, whether it's in sports or the classroom or the arts, in the way that they're comfortable. I absolutely support that. And I will also say that of the 2 candidates up here, I'm proud to be the Democratic candidate. I will fight any incursion on a woman's right to choose. I will proudly defend the legacy of Roe versus Wade, and I will fight the Trump administration and anyone who comes for our rights, Tony.
Sports?
Sports. What was the answer on sports?
Yeah,
What was the answer on sports?
protecting women's sports.
That was the question.
I will gladly support the right of anyone to participate in the sport of their choosing, period.
What about women?
So women.
I answered your question, folks. I don't know how much more clear that I can be.
You can be.
I'm not going to bifurcate and tell people you can't practice this sport because you're biologically a male. I believe in recognizing everyone for their value and who they are. And look, if you don't agree with me,
So we got the answer. We got the answer.
and I will not let all of you tear down the children in our community. I will fight you on that point and love and support every child.
God bless you.
It's not about abortion.
Wow.
Wait. I have a follow-up question for you, Nick, but let's get Tony's answer first. Okay, so the question once again was, what will you do to protect women's spaces like women's sports?
Well, after that heated conversation, look, I believe women's sports should be women's sports, right? If you're a biological male, it's an unfair advantage. Just like we do in the military, and I know people don't want to hear it, there's standards for males and there's standards for females, right? Because they physically can't do a lot of the things that we can do, right? They just can't, right? That's reality. Whether I agree with that or not, that's reality. I will do anything I can to protect women's sports. I have 2 granddaughters that I worry about, that I don't want them to be competing with a man twice her strength, or their strength. So I will protect women's sports. And it's not that I'm against any other group. It's just reality. I'm protecting groups. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're a male, you shouldn't be able to compete with a woman, period. Right? I don't want somebody fighting Mike Tyson and she's only 120 pounds. Makes no sense. We need to use common sense when we're doing these things.
My only comment is, Nick, you just said a moment ago, I will, quote, fight you. And I'm here to be neutral. I hope that I have been neutral to satisfy all of you people. But you said, quote, I will fight you, when I want to remind you of your previous statement about your understanding of your fiduciary duty.
Absolutely.
And let's just assume that you're elected,
Sure.
if you are. You know, it's possible, I don't know, because I haven't polled them, that your representatives may feel differently. What will you do?
So this goes back to and by the way, I will say, I think if we did poll people, I think I know which way they'd go and they'd be with me on this. But let's assume, for the sake of the hypothetical, that you're right. Maybe they're different. Maybe they have a different viewpoint. I will always do what I believe is the right thing to do, what is in the best interest of our children. And let me be very clear. We have 2 little kids at home, and however they grow up, however they identify, whoever they choose to love, I will love them and I will support them, and I will fight anyone who would have them be ashamed of being exactly who they are. And on that point, I will die on that hill. I will fight for the right of every child to be exactly who they are and be loved. And the fact that there's anyone in the room who thinks otherwise, it's truly my
I'm gonna let, hold on guys, hold on. This is for the candidates to express their points of view. That's the most important thing. Tony, you can have,
He's got 15 seconds.
hold on, I've lost track. Does he
You
get?
still have 15 seconds.
I'm done. I made my point.
Has
1
Tony?
minute.
No, he
Okay, has Tony
hasn't.
rebutted yet?
No.
Okay,
So-
hold on. But again, I want to remind everybody of the fiduciary responsibility. It's, not so much fighting what you feel, but what your district feels. So the
Right.
same question is for Tony. Let's say Tony wins, and you find that most of your constituents have the opposite point of view or do not agree. What are you going to do? And/or you can rebut Nick.
Well, I mean, we can have a conversation on why you feel that way, all right? I'm not about feelings as much as facts. Let's talk facts, right? Let's talk about reality. We don't have to agree with everything, and if my constituents want something a certain way, at some point I work for you, right? I don't have to.
At all points, you work for us.
Exactly, right? So I'm gonna do what's in the best interest of my district, and that's really my answer. Whatever's in the best interest of my district, I don't have to agree with it, right? And I'll tell you I don't agree with it. But if that's what you truly want, then that's what we're gonna do.
Very good. So I'm going to give each candidate a 1-minute closing statement. Let's start with Tony.
So, again, my name is Tony Rodriguez. I work in construction. We fix Navy ships in San Diego for the Navy. I'm a grandfather. I'm a father and a husband. My poor wife has been tortured with me for 44 years. When I say that we laugh, but I spent 26 years in the Army, and people forget that without a supportive household, most people in the military become a statistic in a divorce, right? So she suffered a lot. Before I did this, I spoke with her and my son, because I know that being an assembly person, I'm going to be gone a lot again. And they're very supportive of me. I am for the people. That's all I care about, my community. Whether I win or lose, it's not going to matter to me in the sense that I'm not going to stop, volunteering to clean up in the neighborhood. It's not going to stop me from going to San Diego, cleaning up beaches. It's not going to stop me from doing anything I do now. The problem is Nick will have to tolerate it when he gets up there.
Thank you, Tony. Nick.
Thank you. Well, before I go on, Tony, thank you for participating in the debate tonight. Thank you to everyone who hosted and came out. It's no secret that we have different perspective on what's best for California, but I appreciate and I admire anyone who wants to put their name forward. And so let me close with this. I am a proud Democrat running to represent Assembly District 44. I'm proud to be endorsed by the incumbent Assemblymember Laura Friedman, the California Democratic Party, Planned Parenthood, California Environmental Voters, Sierra Club, and yes, organized labor. And I'll simply say this. Now is the time when California is facing enormous challenges. Now is the time for grown-ups at the table with real solutions. And please know that you may not agree with me, but do not mistake passion for anything else. I believe in the best of California being yet to come. I will always fight for our kids and your kids, and what I do believe is in their best interest. And with that, I'd love to earn your vote on November 5th. Thank you all so much.
I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And I want to make sure that everyone remembers that Declaration of Rights from the California Constitution, that we people have the right to instruct our elected representatives, which, you know, we remind them of from time to time. I'm grateful for the time that each of these candidates has made for us tonight. We've heard some good ideas, and I hope that we can work together. I got involved because I want to see the quality of life of this neighborhood upheld, improved, and maintained. And because I think we need to come together as people, whether Democrat or Republican. Most of the things that we care about, we have common concerns. We just may have a different approach toward getting to them. So I'm very happy to have had so many new people here tonight. If you would please make sure to sign our check-in list so we can reach you in the future should you wish to be reached. And don't forget to vote on November 5th. Thank you for being with us tonight.